Chapter 139 There was a man in a tiny swimsuit here just now. A man was here. Another avowed. Here. Just now. I'm not alone. Alden's thoughts had gone blank for a moment, but they came right back online at that. Sir. He shouted, sprinting down the hall. Dude. Liam. Wait. He flung open the door and ran out onto the sidewalk. Where'd he go? Alden spun around in a circle once. Twice. He couldn't see the guy anywhere. I didn't imagine him. I'm not that crazy yet. Liam. He yelled as loud as he could. Liam. Where are you? Oh fuck. Fuck, he's gone. He must be running. Fast. Did he turn the corner up ahead? If I just... He kept shouting, racing toward the intersection, and just as he reached the crosswalk, he heard someone call back. Hey! You good over there? Relieved to the depths of his soul, Alden looked around to see the man in the swimsuit standing in the other crosswalk, on the other side of the intersection. The yellow pedestrian lights were flashing for both of them. What's that on your back? Liam called. An image of the woman on the motorcycle shaking her head and abandoning him flashed through Alden. She's alive. He shouted. I'm trying to get her to someone who can help. She only looks like this because of my skill. I'm definitely not a murderer. Somebody's hurt. The man bounded toward him. He had a friendly face. His eyes widened as he got close enough to get a better look at Alden and Zoraide. Oh wow. What happened to you? That's an Artonan. That's a very bloody Artonan. And she's so stiff. That's my skill. It's Preaser, Tom, stopping her and shielding her. What? What are you doing here in swimwear? Why were you heading toward the coast? Have you seen anyone else? Alden settled on the question that mattered the most. Can you help us somehow? Liam was hovering around Alden's back now, gawking at Zoraide, so Alden had to strain his neck to see him properly. What? Liam asked. Can you help us? Alden repeated. I'm trying to get us out of here as fast as possible. I don't know my way around the area. Of course. Liam exclaimed. Oh wow. You've obviously had a hell of a night already. What in Apex happened to you two? Did you come from that way? Did something go wrong with the evac up there? He pointed in the direction Alden had mentally marked as unsafe, the place where all the lights were out. No. We came from the Artonan ambassador's house. It's a complicated story. Well, don't worry. Unless you think your powers are at risk of giving out. In that case, we might need to worry. Yeah. He ran a hand through his sleek, dark hair and looked up and down the street. We're nowhere near an emergency department, and I don't really know how I would help with something like this. I can hold her and keep her this way for a long time, said Alden. Running far would be hard, but if we walk, you're set then. Yeah. I know a place that's safe. You do? The man was nodding. Yes. If you can really keep the Artonan petrified. You're 100% sure she won't die of her wounds when she's like that? She looks kind of not healthy. I can keep her like this, Alden said firmly. She won't die. Then you're good, buddy. What's your class? Healer? Never mind. I've got you covered. Yeah. Oh, and we can probably use one of Tina's spells to send a message ahead. For a good cause. Definitely. Alden's faith in humanity had taken some critical hits tonight. This guy was restoring it fast. Thank you so much. Who's Tina? And where? Come on. Let's get you to a place where you can rest. Line of asterisks. To Alden's surprise, Liam Long led him right back into Apogee Artist spaces, talking 90 miles an hour the whole way. The safe place he knew about was the ground floor studio he shared with his brother and sister. The brother and sister were B-rank students at Chelena North University. Liam was a B-rank, too. He had just graduated. The guys were brutes. The sister was an adjuster. According to Liam, Apogee's ground floor boom rooms were the perfect base of operations during a natural disaster. Basically, The things were reinforced concrete boxes that allowed artists to get more violently creative with their powers than was allowed in the upstairs studios. Hence, no windows and thick doors. The old lady in the studio across the hall films herself smashing through all sorts of things. Bet you've seen some of her work in movies. Cannonball Betty? We never hear a sound. That does sound good, thought Alden, but did anyone say the rooms were safe to hide in during a magical flood? He was watching Liam input his code into the panel by the door of Boom Room 6. Or a regular flood even? They're at ground level. Are they waterproof? Have they been rated for external impacts by, like, an engineer? His security code is just 123,123,123. Alden had been memorizing it in case he needed to leave and come back for some reason. Liam Long seemed a little too nonchalant about the ongoing disaster. Of course they couldn't officially let people shelter here. There are only a few rooms. But Tina, Royce, and I all agreed it was safe enough. You can stay here in our boom room. I'll get back to them fast and tell them about you. Tina's got a spell that will signal friends on campus if any of us get into trouble. When they get it, they'll know to send someone this way. You just sit tight. He smiled comfortingly and pushed open the door, gesturing for Alden to step inside. Alden did take a step inside. Then the lights came on automatically, and he reversed course so quickly he almost fell down. Thank you so much, but Zeraidi and I are just going to head toward downtown on our own. Nice meeting you. Sorry to bother you. I think I'll be fast enough to get where I'm going. I hope you and your brother and sister and everyone you know have a wonderful time together in your bathing suits. See? Wait! Shouted Liam. No way. Alden was down the hall grabbing the puzzle piece doorknob in a heartbeat. The man's bare feet were slapping the floor behind him. It's not a torture chamber. Liam shouted. I'm sure it's not. Alden shouted back as he shot outside. No judgment. Just going now. For multiple personal reasons. He ran as fast as he could. Liam Long caught up to him, passed him, and skidded to a halt in front of him. He's faster than me. Probably a speedster. I'm screwed. Kid, it's not a torture chamber. I mean it sort of is, but maybe if I kick him hard enough in the nuts. Tina, Royce, and I just use it to scare ourselves. I'm sure you do. That sounds like a thing anyone might do. Like I said. No judgment. I just realized I felt like running right now. Kick him and then kick him again. I know it looks weird. Liam waved his hands. But we just get together and scare the shit out of each other. I swear. Why? Alden demanded. Because. He dropped his arms and gave Alden an embarrassed smile. We're doing it to help each other level. Alden blinked. What? Line of asterisks. This is so ridiculous and disappointing. It was a few minutes later, and Alden was sitting backwards on a folding chair in the Long siblings' private dungeon, staring at a tarantula. The spider lifted its hairy front legs to scrabble at the glass walls of its tank. Other habitats for roaches, a small snake, and a particularly evil-looking scorpion lined the shelves above and below it. Not you. You're very scary, Alden muttered to the tarantula. So was everything else in this place, even though Liam Long had hinted that he and his siblings had gone beyond their original fears. Lately, they had been using sketchy substances on each other to make everything in the room even worse and really get that adrenaline pumping. They had a lifelike model Gryvik. The serrated tongue extending from its mouth could be controlled with a remote. There was a big drum full of liquid. Alden hoped it was water, with a bunch of massive chains beside it. And, naturally, they'd made their very own Iron Maiden and included a heater, so that they could risk heat stroke in addition to a skewering. And those were just a few of the pieces Alden knew how to identify. What the hell do they do to each other with those suction cup things? He understood what they were going for. Though it had never in his life occurred to him that anyone would get together on the weekends with their brother and sister and engage in extreme stress induction for the sake of faster leveling. I bet you're thinking we're crazy. Liam was chuckling to himself as he pulled open the drawers of one of the only normal items in this domain of terror, a steel office desk that looked like it had been around since the Cold War. "This isn't that different from how the universities train people in the hero programs," he said. "Those are 90% about strengthening powers. We've just put together our own version of it. Sort of. Kind of. Seriously, though?" Alden couldn't even argue with the guy about the validity of the project. It sounded like the Longs were setting up stressful situations for each other that demanded use of their avowed abilities to escape from. Locking your sister in an Iron Maiden and refusing to let her out until she learned how to use her skill on an object 12 centimeters farther away than she'd been able to manage last weekend was not normal. But Alden had been burned, darted, impaled, and thrown off a 50-foot-high wall this week. So he really didn't have as much righteous ground to stand on as he would have liked. Competitive environments, going up against other avowed, being forced to try new things with your magic or else. "Listen," said Alden, "I'm in the talent development program at CNH. I was in the gym a few hours ago. I know what kind of environments we use to promote growth and lead to new discoveries about our powers. But it's not dangerous when we do it. We're extremely well protected, even from pain most of the time. What you and your brother and sister are planning tonight is different, and it makes me so. You're a hero student. At B rank. Wow. Way to go." Damn frustrated, Alden finished in his own head. Just as well that he hadn't said it out loud. Liam didn't owe him anything. Not even common sense. But Alden was still baffled, annoyed, and disheartened that the person he'd found who was somewhat willing to help him was in the middle of treating the emergency like a personal training ground. "You must be awesome," Liam continued. "We all tried to get in. Did the whole application cycle in high school, then in uni. So brutal at B, I swear they auto-rejected me every time just because my GPA wasn't perfect. Tina made it to the combat assessment in high school once. Royce is still thinking of trying out one more time for the uni program. Can't age out of that one at least. If he can bash through 3 levels in the next 12 months, that'll put a lot of the admissions committee's doubts to rest." He rummaged through the drawer and slammed it shut. Reaching for the next, he sighed. "Tina, what's the point of having a filing system if you aren't going to use it? Where's the currently active folder?" Tina Long, who was with the other brother, on their way to play chicken with the oceanic anomalies, had a skill that magically paired objects, along with spells that took advantage of the pairings in a few different ways. She could make temporary, short-range communication devices with it. Liam had an earring his sister could use to signal him. He was going to give Alden something else she had recently used her skill on so that he could get in touch with the siblings to share emergency news. If Liam could actually find it. "I have to try one more time," Alden thought. "These guys should absolutely come with me. What they're doing is nuts. You were listening when I told you that a magical substance is causing all of this, right? There are a bajillion particles of it in the water. From what I understand, they latch onto stuff and try to sink it or throw it around. Tons of magic, pulling water onto shore. I think sometimes the effect is pretty weak. The blob of water around that high-heel shoe on the bridge had seemed relatively self-contained and innocuous. But sometimes it's crazy strong. It moved the span. It covered the bridge and yanked it. Plopstar is out there attacking the whole ocean on system orders, so casting spells that it might affect it, then." Liam turned to him excitedly. "That's good intel. I still can't believe the night you've had. On the span. Carrying an ambassador's assistant around. I bet you leveled up after this." "I'd better fucking not." Liam looked startled. Alden shook his head. "What I mean is, this is serious. And it's not just water. It threw a truck across the bridge so hard that it smashed through a bunch of other vehicles like bowling pins. My classmates had to help rescue drivers. The ocean will be moving in really unpredictable ways. It's not like a wave at the beach. You won't be able to guess how big or which way. Ho. This is it." Liam waved a large accordion folder through the air and did a little victory jig in the middle of his family torture chamber. In his swim briefs. Alden held back the urge to yell. Liam dumped the folder onto the desk, and bric-a-brac tumbled out. He grabbed a pair of black cardstock rectangles and passed one of them to Alden, who held an arm over the chair back to take both it and a small, pointy wooden stick the man offered along with it. Alden examined the card. The word testing was visible on the corner in rainbow letters. This is one of those scratch art things where you scrape the black layer off, and the colors are underneath? He asked. Yep, said Liam, holding the other card. Don't scratch it right away. They've already been paired, but Tina has to cast a spell on at least one half to make them start mimicking each other. I'll take this one to her, she'll spell it, and she'll write you a little note to let you know it's active. Then you can message us back. Thank you. Alden did mean it. Even a limited ability to communicate with a single adjuster felt like a lifeline under the circumstances. He could tell them where he was if he ran into trouble. They could tell him where danger was, since they're going to be chasing it. He shifted, adjusting the righty's weight again, and the chair creaked. You look worried, Alden. Don't be. We know what we're doing. Even the system doesn't know what it's doing tonight, Alden said tersely. Huh. Well, that might be true. Liam shut the folder back in the drawer. We did think we'd get a later teleport out when we rejected the first ones. It said it advised against it, so I suppose it's fair. But we were going to use it to plan our trials for the night. Go hard, get tired, teleport out. It hasn't offered another time slot. Guess it was a take your one shot or take care of yourself kind of deal. He looked at Alden curiously. I took mine, Alden said. It just didn't work out. Obviously. He wasn't sure if Liam's willingness to not ask questions and take a preserved, horribly injured alien in stride was a sign of practicality or a symptom of his slap-happy approach to the events of the night in general. I wish you'd consider staying here in our boom room, said Liam, smiling at him. You could have a seat. Get some rest. The snake is friendly. We're all coming back here after we are done testing ourselves against the water and anything else we might find, so you won't be alone for long. Alden tucked his scratch-rid card into his messenger bag, trying to come up with one last argument that might inject some reasonable fear into this sort of person. I appreciate the offer. A lot. I'll come back here if I need to. If everything absolutely goes to shit and I have no other option. But the system is suggesting you leave. Don't you think if it was really safe, it would have just said stay where you are? Alden asked. Even if it's just too busy and it overlooked this place, nobody else came to shelter here. Not even the other people who rent boom rooms. Maybe they're not as safe as you think. Maybe if I compliment him. I haven't tried that one yet. I think the way you guys are training yourselves is already impressive. You don't have to push it even farther and risk your lives. You've got a great thing going, right? Thanks. You're a good kid. But don't worry so much, said Liam. We'll have each other's backs, and the thing is, this is real. We try to push our limits, but you always know it's fake on some level when your little bro is the one threatening you with Chester. He jerked a thumb toward the Gryvik. We've never had a chance to test ourselves versus actual danger. Magical danger. And we need it. Avowed come out of real disasters changed, said Liam. Do they? Alden spoke flatly. That dreamy tone in the brute's voice. Alden's patience and willingness to cajole Liam long died there. All that was left was a little gratitude for the kindness and the offer of help, limited though it was. And a shadow of despondence about the fact that sometimes friendly people were hopelessly stupid. I can't save him and myself and Zarighty. I can't drag him with me. Maybe with his siblings he'll be strong enough and lucky enough to stay safe. He stood up from the chair. Liam still hadn't noticed his mood shift. He was waxing enthusiastic about his goals. Almost everyone who's ever learned to double on their stats has managed it the first time in a crisis. I know it's a long shot, but we are the longs. Tonight could be our night for that kind of rare breakthrough. If something like that happened for me, good luck, said Alden, slapping a stimulant injector and a small roll of bandaging onto the desk. He had taken them from his bag while Liam was rummaging through the drawers. He thought it was alright to give them away since he had 2 of each. Read the instructions before you use that. Try to stay alive. He headed for the door so quickly that Liam didn't react to his abrupt departure until he was turning the handle. You too. See you around sometime. I still hang around campus a lot because of my bro and sis. Maybe we'll. He kept talking. Alden stopped listening. He'd just stepped outside the Long's boom room, and the building was vibrating around him. A low whomp, so deep that he felt it, sounded. He froze, looking down the hall. The puzzle door was only a few meters away. There was no noise down here earlier. Thick walls. Liam, he said, something's not right. The floor, a crash from behind him made him turn. When he did, he saw the large bottle from the top of the water cooler sliding down the hall toward him. Having been knocked free of its base, the mouth of the bottle was open, but none of the water was escaping from it. Alden jumped out of the way. It hit the wall beside the puzzle door and stopped. None of the water's pouring out. Alden watched it. Is it all pulling in the direction, just dragging the bottle along for the ride? He couldn't think of what else it could be. Tina? Hey. You're not coming through clear. Liam exited the room to stand in the hall beside Alden. He was tugging his messaging earring free of his lobe. It was a golden ball stud, and it was emitting a faint, metallic voice. Run, it said. Goo. This might not have been a good night for her to experiment with a mismatched pair, Liam said apologetically. But we didn't know something was about to happen when she used her skill on the earrings. Normally she sounds way bet. Alden was ignoring him in favor of staring at the stud on his palm. What's happening? Alden demanded, gripping his Zerite braid strap and addressing the earring. Where's the water? TSSS gone. SINNNNGGGNG Place. Sing Place? She means Dr. Singh's place. We were going to meet up there, but... For the first time, Liam looked worried. Hey. Do you think? Tina, are you saying Dr. Singh's place is gone? What about all that shielding they had installed? Run. Alden didn't wait to hear the rest of it. He needed to see for himself. Running out into the street, in the direction the water in the bottle seemed to be heading, felt wrong. And he thought Liam's assurances about the safety of the ground floor were based on too much wishful thinking to trust. So he went with his own instinct, which was shouting the same thing it had been the last time he had heard the sound of approaching danger. Up. We go up. His earlier wonderings about power outages and his knowledge that the elevator was a slow one sent him scrambling for the stairwell. When he reached it, he yanked open the door so hard it smashed into the wall. He heard Liam shouting something. No time to figure out if it's at me or his sister. Get to the 6th floor. Go. He couldn't feel the vibration anymore because he was moving his own body as hard as he could. Floor 2. The stairwell had the number painted on the wall in bright blue. It was almost the same size, typeface, and color as Alden's old high school had used. A momentary flash of déjà vu. He left it behind him as he passed the landing and headed for the 3rd floor. His breath was loud in his ears. His thoughts raced ahead to what he would do if the street down below looked like this or like that when he got a look at it. His feet were pounding solidly against the steps. And then the world around him changed all at once. There was an explosion of sound. Breaking glass. One of the perfectly spaced steps not being where he expected as the building shook. Alden caught himself painfully on hands and knees, halfway up a flight of stairs. He bit his tongue. He tried to jump right back up, but the stairs were still moving. He held himself there, panting. He heard a river, as loud as if it were pouring on top of his head. He heard screaming. What? What's happening exactly? His brain didn't have enough information or experience. It couldn't answer him. Still on his knees, he reached for the stair railing and clung to it. Shaking. It was shaking or he was. Everything was suddenly so unstable. He looked through the bars. There was the river, filling the stairwell and the landing below him. The water was so filthy it was almost black. 1,000 pieces of unnameable debris were smashing against the walls. The door to the second floor was ripped from its hinges, floating. And there was Liam, wet, bellowing something, pulling himself out of the water and up the staircase behind Alden. He must have followed me. Alden stared. He clung. Liam kept yelling, and Alden kept not registering the actual words. Taking in whatever Liam was doing and thinking and wanting from him was just so much less important than understanding everything else. Then a hand landed on Zoraide and single quote. He felt it with his authority. "Don't touch her." Alden's shout echoed up the stairwell, but it sounded like nothing compared to everything else. The back of his hand stung, and he realized he'd slapped Liam Long's arm away. Hard. "We've gotta go. We've gotta go, man." Liam was screaming. "The water. The water." Alden stood. He could stand. Liam was already running upstairs. "The water's not rising." Alden didn't realize he'd observed it until he said it. He looked over the railing again to make sure he'd understood correctly. "I don't think the magic is pulling it right now." It was like on the bridge, when the magic of the sinker-sender had suddenly broken or exhausted itself, and everything had gone back to normal. The water below him looked like water. Turbulent water that had just crashed through the second story of a building, but the way all of that debris was swirling in it, that was normal water behavior. It didn't look like it was on a mission to climb the walls or go somewhere. "All right," said Alden, gazing down at it. "I'm okay. We're both okay. I still need to get upstairs." He could hear Liam swearing as the man fled upwards. Alden started to climb, fast but not at a run this time. He still wasn't sure about the steadiness of the floor beneath him. He saw Liam's wet footprints on the next landing. One of them was tinged pink with blood. He made it up a few more steps before the power went out. Alden entered the sixth-floor gallery, and the door closed behind him, cutting off the stairwell's emergency backup lighting. He stood still, waiting for his eyes to adjust to the darkness, listening to his one conscious companion. "No. Oh no. Oh man. Oh shit. No no no." Liam was only a shape for now, running through the forest of statues. His speed was out of place in this setting, making him look more like a specter from a horror film than a goofy guy without much clothing on. The litany of no's wasn't for Alden. It was just a ramble, volume rising and falling, as he raced from one side of the gallery to the other to stare out windows in every direction. Alden took a few seconds to consider himself and his burden. His body was all right. Miraculously, the fall on the staircase hadn't really hurt him. His broken toes were back to throbbing fiercely. An elbow felt bruised. Zoraide was all right, too. At least, she wasn't any worse than she had been. He hadn't let her go for even a second. When he could finally see well enough to weave between the statues, he did so, heading for the acrylic bench where he'd rested for such a short while. He looked down onto a world that was much blacker, wetter, and emptier than it had been minutes before. There were still lights, battery-powered things, magical things, a functional power grid in the distance, two small fires burning in this neighborhood. One of them was flaring and sputtering on top of a raft of debris that floated near the intersection just beneath him. The pedestrian crossing lights still work. How eerie to see the water flashing yellow, lit from below. Alden walked slowly along the perimeter of the gallery, trying to see everything and understand all of it. He thought the water had mostly come from the dark place he'd spotted earlier. The area where the Long siblings had planned to engage in their own personal man versus nature trial. Almost everything between where he stood and that place was dark now, and what he could make out didn't look right. Structures were standing here and there. But it wasn't as it had been. Too flat. Some of the row-off lines that he'd thought were noteworthy earlier were nowhere to be seen. Even with the terrible visibility, he knew things were missing. Whether they were underwater or raised. Next, he stared in the direction he'd planned to travel, examining what was left of the townhouses with the Gothic-style facades he'd noticed earlier. There wasn't much. Roofs gone. Walls gone. A couple of corners still standing tall. He watched as the burning debris started to slide down the street, slow at first and then faster, half of it peeling away from the raft as it encountered the pole of a streetlight, the rest of it continuing to pick up speed as the water went strange once more, developing an organized current where none should be. And it was heading in the very direction Alden himself wished to go. What caused the wave that hit our building? How big must it have been to take out the townhouses and shake this place? His imagination gave him guesses, but he had no idea if they were right. The scale of it was hard to handle. Alden pictured a particularly large patch or a particularly strong particle of the contamination latching onto something huge, a house instead of a high heel. Or something even bigger than that. It could have pulled more and more water toward the thing to cover it, blobbing up and up, trying to drag it. Hell, maybe it had dragged it. Maybe a whole submerged house could move like the truck that had caused the pileup marks had been caught in, blasting forward, borne inside its own juggernaut of a wave. It would destroy things as it went. And it would destroy them when it gave up, too. A giant water blob or column or whatever just collapsing when the magic runs out. How much water did it actually take to tear down houses? Alden had a sketchy memory from just before he left home. Some morning news personality warning the good people of Chicago to steer clear of the area where Skiff was fighting that man who'd tried to make a lair under Lake Michigan. Our hunky fan favorite beach bum may not look dangerous, but remember folks, Skiff's not all fun and games. Just a few inches of swiftly moving water can knock you right off your feet. It was something like that anyway. He did remember the line right after that verbatim, or maybe we should call it skiffly moving water. It was so tasteless. Why do morning shows try to turn things that shouldn't be jokes into jokes? He focused on the building that had been his next goal. Stop, the one that looked like it was about the same size as this one. It was still there. The main power seemed to be out, but there was a dull blue glow throughout it now instead. Some kind of emergency feature probably. Would I have made it in time, or would I have died in the street with Zerati? A useless question he couldn't help asking. Tina? Tina? Royce? Are you guys there? Alden turned to watch Liam. He stood nearby. Alden could see well enough now to make out the statue of a woman behind him, reaching out as if asking a child that didn't exist to leap into her arms. Liam had managed to keep hold of his earring. He was holding it so close to his lips it looked like he was about to eat it. He even managed to keep the scratch board and the bandages I gave him. They were in his other fist. You guys? Answer me. Answer me. Maybe I should say something to him. He didn't. What was there to say really? Any comfort he could offer would be a cheap nothing from a stranger. Maybe Liam's brother and sister were all right. Maybe they weren't. People die so fast. Alden realized he was getting a little odd. One too many shocks per hour or something. But he didn't feel like he was about to panic again, so he'd take this. For a couple more minutes, he watched everything. Just to be sure. Liam kept trying to call his siblings through the earring. The water's moving somewhere else. It looks like it might be pulling out of this area, but who knows how long that will last? I'm leaving if I can, Alden said finally. There are still lights toward the inner curve of the crescent. I'll head that way, then toward people. As fast as possible. No stopping. Liam stared at him like he'd started speaking another language. What? If the water's already this far inland, we're going to be completely cut off sooner or later. This whole point of the crescent could be gone by morning, said Alden. And unless they've got way more people working rescue than they need, why would anyone come here to help us? There was at least one big, highly populated family neighborhood down in F being hit hard. Rescuers are going to be prioritizing other places. They won't be looking for stragglers here, in these few abandoned neighborhoods, where everyone already had their chance to get out. He turned back to watch the receding water. It's moving so fast. The larger debris was starting to drag on pavement instead of floating. A couple of minutes later, when Alden headed for the stairs, Liam stopped him with a hand on his shoulder. I have to go find my brother and sister, he said in an urgent voice. I can't leave them. I hope you do find them, said Alden. I hope they're safe. I don't. Ha ha. I don't even know where my shoes are. Liam suddenly looked down at Alden's sandals. Alden looked down at Liam's bare feet. "Did you leave a pair downstairs in your torture chamber?" Liam nodded. "They are probably still there, then. Don't worry. The building hasn't collapsed, so the ground floor is just wet, right? Not gone. They'll be near where you left them." Alden didn't know if it was true or not. He said it like he believed it was true. "Ha! Right. Right." Liam was still staring at the sandals. "Don't go just yet. Do you have... Let me think. Do you have any more medicine? And bandages? You know Tina and Royce might need stuff like that. They're out there in it. They might need things. I might need things to help them." Alden's hesitation was swift, and in the dark, he hoped it couldn't even be seen on his face. There were a few things in the medical kit he could probably afford to share. But if he said yes, he'd have to open his bag and pull them out right here. And he wasn't comfortable letting Liam Long know he had a full medical kit. He wasn't comfortable enough to stick around, sorting through the supplies and dividing them up. Not now. Not with the man eyeing the hiking sandals as if he was just now realizing what a fool he was for planning to go fight tsunamis naked. Every time you stick your own neck out to save a stranger's, pretend I'm there with you. Pretend we're getting into it together and we're facing the exact same amount of struggle and the exact same consequences for failure. "Man, I'm sorry," said Alden. "I wish I had more. As far as useful stuff goes, I've only got one more painkiller. And a disgusting protein bar. You can have the meds, though." He reached into his shorts and pulled out one of the injectors he'd pocketed earlier. It was the only thing he could give up without revealing everything else. "And thanks for the communication device. When you find your sister, get her to message me, alright? I'll report back on where I am and what the situation is. Think of me as your forward scout. I'm not moving fast, so you guys might even meet up with me before we leave the evac zone." He forced the injector into Liam's cold hand. Yeah, that's a good idea," Liam muttered, turning his eyes to the injector. "And if we don't meet up, I'll see y'all around campus next week," said Alden, making his first ever deliberate attempt to sound like he was a manly badass who should not have his footwear stolen. "We've got this, Liam. Glad I met you tonight." He refused to wonder why his attempt to convey manly badassery was trending both southern and severe, like some terrible big snake line hybrid. He left right away, keeping his back straight and his walk steady. As he crossed the gallery, refusing to turn back to look at Liam, there was a place at the top of his spine, between his shoulder blades, that he was all too aware of. No more shield poncho, he thought. If someone tries to stab me again tonight, the blade will go right through. Chapter 140. I love grocery shopping. The voice was joyful, warm, and golden as honey. It sang out over the cacophony of thumping music, ringing Argold slots, noisy laughter, and the squawking of the flock of macaws currently displayed on the arched screen that formed the roof over the crowded street. Natalie Quirr stood in front of a casino that was decked out in flashing green lights. She was spinning in place, her outstretched arms full of takeout bags with restaurant names emblazoned on the sides. "This is not grocery shopping, greater than said Elijah. Shopping means you pay money. Greater than. Grocery getting then," said Natalie. "I love it. Everyone in class said it would be hard to find some of this stuff, but the chefs are all so friendly. I have kitchen scraps from 5 different planets in here." Elijah shook her head. "She does offer them all money." Hadaisa was watching a woman across the street who was wearing glowing silver wings and a matching leotard. The performer was 6 meters above the pavement, leaping through the air. "Adjuster?" she guessed as the woman paused to take a bow over the watchers' heads. The other 2 followed her gaze. She could be right? Maybe the wings are tools she made, Natalie suggested. "Oh. Do you think they're the kind of gear that only works with one of the creator's skills, or does she sell them?" She started to head toward the performer, but stopped at Elijah's voice. "Agility brute," the older girl said confidently, using a very popular spell impression. Greater than. Oh. Are you sure? She's always sure, greater than said Hadaisa. Then in a teasing voice, she added, and Zedora nerd. I'm here to live the whole life. Greater than Elijah announced. You girls can't even find the bus stop sometimes. You'd be lost without me. Greater than. I probably would, said Natalie. My mama thinks you wear a halo, Elijah. She's like, that's a young lady with good sense, Natalie. I wish you wouldn't go out after 9 p.m., but if you do, you stay with her. Ha! Said Hadaisa. Next time your family calls, let me talk to them. She has fooled them. Elijah bowed dramatically. Hadaisa glared at her. Why were you so polite in front of Natalie's parents, and when I introduced you to my father, you were wearing a fake tattoo on your forehead and eating a whole cured sausage? He is so strict. Now I have to pretend I left you behind after intake. Greater than. You didn't give me enough warning, greater than Elijah replied. Was that seafood restaurant the last place on your list, Natalie? Greater than. There's one more. They officially closed at midnight, but one of the uni girls who works there said I could come by. They have these big soft shell eggs. This big. Her bag smashed into her as she tried to hold her hands up to show them the size. Laid by an epi. Ebi? Am I saying that right? They are supposed to be really creamy and taste like apples and mayonnaise. Hadaisa made a face. Let's find greater than the epis, said Elijah. Breakfast for tomorrow. You will eat anything, said Hadaisa. Actually, I was going to turn them into a dressing. Natalie's words were cut off by sirens. All over the street, performers and revelers stopped and looked around in alarm. What is this? The girls drew closer together. Elijah said something in Lithuanian, and Natalie and Hadaisa both stared at her in confusion. No translations appeared on their interfaces, but a moment later, system alerts did. Disaster alert, attack on Matadero. Disaster alert, low probability of chaos exposure. Disaster alert, oceanic anomalies, imminent. Avoid seawater. Seek high ground. Beware of possible tsunami. Line of asterisks. Line of asterisks. Flat on his back in bed, Luke clutched a pillow shaped like a fried egg to his chest and yawned. It's so late. I should sleep. Instead, he pulled up another interface window. He had 3 arranged in front of his eyes now, all showing things worthy of deep contemplation. In the one on the lower left, Hazel was absolutely losing her shit. He set it to play in slow motion. I still can't believe that happened. Hazel blowing up, even in such a phenomenal way, wasn't that big of a surprise. She had never been hesitant about dishing out humiliation and criticism to others, but she sure didn't like the taste of them herself. A steady diet of praise and being told you can do no wrong must make someone saying they don't like you because you did something wrong really hard to swallow. He was glad she was off Earth. He wasn't sure that working for the palace full-time would cure her, though. Maybe being separated from her parents, Corin, and Alaya will be enough to help her grow a functional personality, but with her usual job, she might end up even more of a monster. If Parvadatur had anything to do with managing Hazel, Lute would have called and warned the guy. Alaya confirmed Hazel's crimes, outed her skill, and apologized on her behalf on camera. That was the part Lute was still marveling at. He wished he could see inside his grandmother's twisted mind for just a second so he'd know what percentage of her behavior was based on her interest in Alden and what percentage was her irritation with Hazel. Surely politics was also in the mix somehow. And me too. Unfortunately. He turned his attention to the middle video. The volume was on so he could listen to it. It was the Korra player who had come to Lute's 7th birthday party. The man had been filmed playing in Park Debaters a couple of months ago. He was still one of Lute's favorite street musicians. Would he teach me to play the Korra? Would it be rude if I asked? He had been wondering about it for a while. It wouldn't have felt rude before, when he was bound for a normal human life. Now it was more complicated. Just like everything else. He wanted to think that if a high rank with their hearing, hands, and Brainol Upgraded had approached him in June of last year and asked to learn the harp, he would have politely said, "I'm too busy to teach you, but good luck." But he was afraid it would have been something more akin to, "Never. How dare you ask? Take your magic fingers and shove them where the sun can't shine. What if he thinks I'm just a show-off dilettante like stupid Hugh? My daddy says I don't need piano lessons like you, whiff boy," he muttered, imagining Hazel's voice in his head. "The system will turn me into a natural musician as soon as I get Janer, and then I can pick up any instrument I want so easy. I wonder if Ali is right, and one day I'll be old and I just won't care about any of the things she said or did to me anymore." He couldn't imagine it. He glanced at the third window. It was a picture from Elijah's social media page. She had posted it an hour ago, and he'd been staring at it ever since, trying to think of exactly the right comment to make. Something casual and friendly. Something that would make her smile. Something that said, "I'm a naturally engaging person who didn't have to spend an hour thinking up this comment." But it also needs to be mature. And a little funny. And smart. And not long. A universe contained in a single sentence. The poetic masterpiece of comments. If she'd been somewhere he was familiar with, he could have offered her advice for things to do. But her picture was of a team participating in a human stacking challenge outside of a casino. She was down in New Sabaris. Lute'd been there just once, not long after he'd affixed, to see what it was like. What it was like was very loud and crowded and full of so many adults trying to age-check him that he'd left without even setting foot in the restaurant that had been his intended destination. He had mentioned it to Amy, and she had told him that chainers weren't allowed in the casinos anyway. She had said it in such a sorrowful voice that Lute wondered if she really wanted to gamble or if the ban was somehow her fault. What if Elijah is there because she loves poker or something? If a girl agrees to go on a date with me, will she get a lifetime casino ban by association? I could learn a luck chain and put it on someone else just as easily as his concerns were shattered by the sound of a siren. He almost fell off his loft bed. Is that the fire alarm? A guy had set himself on fire last night, so the idea was fresh in his head. Then the system notices arrived. Lute had just enough time to read them a few times, get out of bed, and start pulling on clothes before the sound of a woman's magnified shout came from outside. "Garden Hall residents," she said in a clear but hurried voice. "All of you should have received instructions to report to campus shelters. That means the MPE building for you. Please head there now. If you don't know the location of the MPE building, ask a student in the talent development program. No running. No panicking. No staying in your rooms. We will be sending people in to check shortly." Lute threw a jacket on. His mind was racing. Matadero. But nobody ever. And what does oceanic anomaly mean? Giant whirlpools. Have the whales risen up against us? System, I feel like you're being a little scanty with the information here. Do you not know what's going on for sure or something? He started to zip up the jacket, but his hand stopped halfway through. Avoid seawater. Where's Libra tonight? Where's Mom? Line of asterisks. Line of asterisks. Listen, Jeffrey, Reinhard whispered, dragging the aqua brute a few steps away from Astrid, who was calling a car for them. They were all three waiting under a shelter near one of the Rosa Grove Mall exits. It was designed to look like an oversized umbrella, covered in bright tube lights. I'm trying to do you a favor here. Jeffy's not short for Jeffrey. It doesn't matter. Now listen. It's long for Jeff. Reinhard's mouth closed. A lot of people make that mistake, said Jeffy. I don't mind or anything. Do you want to ride alone with Astrid or not? The archer hissed. I can go separately. Jeffy stared at him. But we won't be alone. There's a driver. She obviously likes you, you blue-haired. What are you two talking about? Astrid asked. She was using the umbrella shelter's curved handle as a prop while she tightened the laces on her shoes. I was just telling Jeffy that I'm heading to the train station instead, Reinhard said loudly. I'll go to my house. Sleeping in my old room's more comfortable than campus anyway. Good night. Have a safe trip, you two. Bye. Before either of them could ask questions, he took off. That was absolutely my good deed for the week, he said to himself several minutes later as he rode an escalator toward a train platform. They both owe me now. I have done Cupid duty. He mimed, shooting an arrow at one of the lights overhead. A loud, rising wail broke his concentration. Reinhard stumbled off the escalator, squinting at the alerts in front of him disbelievingly. Tsunami? The word was being repeated by several people around him, in equally shocked tones. Like big waves? He gasped, then ran for the other escalator. He flew up it and then down the street, heading back toward the mall. Jeffy! He shouted as soon as he could see the glowing umbrella shelter. Astrid! You guys haven't left yet, right? The sirens were howling. Jeffy! When he reached the spot, he found Astrid waiting for him. You did come back. She grabbed him by his shoulders and then let them go again in a gesture that was more reality confirmation than embrace. Good. I thought you might, so I waited. Didn't want you to be alone. But I was getting really worried that was the wrong move. Reinhard, the system, I know, he said. Where the hell is Jeffy? Did he leave? He's gone, she said. It took him. What did? He demanded, still looking around as if he expected to spot the Aqua Brute's mohawk in the shadows. Reinhard. At the baffled, slightly helpless tone in her voice, he went still. Oh, he said. You mean he got summoned? Yeah. That. Like avowed do. Yeah. They both stared at each other. He is on Enzidora still, said Astrid. It would be weird if it was an emergency summons to somewhere else, right? Under these circumstances. That would be ironic. He ran a hand over his buzzed hair, then let it fall. Hey, he's first in our class to be summoned. We haven't even been in school long enough to get a betting pool going on who it'll be. There's Alden. Well, yeah. But Alden's. His situation's not really. She swallowed. I'm sure Jeffy'll be fine, Reinhard said. The guy's got an annoyingly great subclass that's even more great in this situation. We're the ones who need to get ourselves to a tall building. I know. Stay with me. He life-jacketed me before he left, so I'm basically an emergency flotation device now. We're not that close to the water though, so it might have been a wasted spell. Says who? Reinhard asked. If I see so much as an oversized raindrop I'm going to grab you. Since when do we have tsunami warnings here? And why would anyone attack Matadero? It's bad, she agreed. And we can't make calls. I still have my old cell phone, but I left it back in my room. I'm getting so used to the interface. They started walking, and before long, they were in a flow of foot traffic, headed toward the center of F and the highest buildings on the island. He was scared, Astrid said quietly as they cut through a plaza at the back of a noisy, nervous pack of people. Not too bad. He was trying to read me his emergency summoning notice, and I was telling him it was fine, the system probably just needed him to help someone in the water. And he was saying of course it was fine and he'd do his best. Only I could tell he was scared. And then he was gone. It was a while before Reinhard answered her. Who wouldn't be scared? Line of asterisks. Line of asterisks. Alden went down the stairs quickly. But not too quickly. Don't run. He'll hear your feet on the steps. Running makes it look like you're trying to get away from him. Trying to get away might make him wonder if he shouldn't let you. He hoped he was being paranoid. Liam seemed more like a person who would beg for your stuff than a person who would actually threaten you for it. A decent enough guy who was coming face to face with the terrible choices he'd made tonight. It didn't really matter. A scared stranger was unpredictable. The consequences for misjudgments were too high. There was a new, dangerous feeling in the air. Alden was acutely aware of his own weaknesses. I can't outrun him. I can't fight him. Helping him look for his family sounds like a suicide mission. And if I dropped Zoraide, she could die. The second-floor landing was below him, and the emergency lights in the stairwell were bright, illuminating an absolute wreck. The water had drained away, leaving behind so much destroyed stuff: the broken door, glass, wood, an easel, an office chair. A dozen flavors of unidentifiable, sharp, shattered crap. Alden approached it cautiously. There was no way to avoid stepping on some of it. But the hiking sandals the righty had gotten for him had thick soles, so that was something at least. Stay up there trying to wrap your head around this shitty situation just a little longer, please, Liam. Just long enough for me to get out. He made his way through the maze of garbage step by step, trying to balance his need for speed with his need to still have functional legs and feet once he made it outside. You know, Dura Brute would actually be fantastic. Can you walk across broken glass like it's beach sand already? I think so. Once he gets himself where he wants to be, he could just barrel through a mess like this for sure. Or he could cannonball off the roof and skip the stairs altogether. He was almost at the bottom when the stairwell reverberated with the sound of footfalls. Damn. Okay. More fast. Less careful. Alden jumped 4 steps into a spot that looked clear enough, landing hard thanks to the weight of his passenger. Here, below the second floor, drops of water rained down from all the pockets and crevices of junk they'd been trapped in. Alden wanted to stop and study the movement of it, to see if he could figure out if there was some kind of rule or clue about how it got pulled toward its next target. The individual falling drops seemed to be responding to gravity like normal in here, but there was also a big wedge of water building up against the wall, as if the room were tilted. Tina? Tina, are you there? Liam was still talking loudly to the earring. His voice echoed. Alden reached the last staircase. Surprisingly, the debris wasn't that bad down here. There was a lot of smaller stuff littering the floor. A whole electric keyboard was in the corner on its side. And the door was gone. It wasn't even in the stairwell. It was just gone like it had never been there at all. Alden ran out without pausing to question his good fortune. Within 3 steps, though, he realized the ground floor was going to be pitch black as he got farther from the emergency lighted staircase. I know where the puzzle door is. Apogee's ground floor had more than one hall lined with the reinforced boom rooms. He couldn't currently see the central hallway where a few strides past the long siblings' torture room would lead him to the exit, but it wasn't far at all. 1 turn and a straight shot. It's fine. But the pause gave him a split second to consider another urgent problem. If he ran straight out into the street, he might not be able to jog away from Liam at whatever pace he wanted. Outdoors it was probably at least as difficult to navigate as this. And what if there wasn't a puzzle door anymore? Just rubble for him to dig through to find a way out. If I'm even a little slow, Liam might catch up to me. If he can't find his own shoes, he might actively try to chase me down. It's safer if I watch him leave. The man was about to reach him. Thought turned to decision, and Alden rushed to hide himself and Zarighty in the deeper darkness of the hall he was on. Soon, his feet were crunching on things he couldn't properly see. He dodged larger shapes and walked along a damp wall. I think the end is just ahead? It was getting harder to make out anything. He shuffled a few more steps, and he accidentally kicked a pile of something that shifted and plopped on top of his foot. It felt like a giant wad of wet toilet paper, which seemed unlikely. He shook it off and stood still, lifting a hand to his chest as if that might keep his heart from beating out of it. Okay. Okay. Far enough. Don't let yourself panic and keep stumbling around for no reason. He turned just in time to see Liam stepping out of the stairwell. The light at his back made him super visible, and Alden's lizard brain hissed that the other avowed could definitely see him right now if he looked this way. He bent his knees and squatted to make himself less obviously person-shaped. Even if he looks this way, he won't see me. Not unless he's got vision enhancements to help him, and I don't think he does. Liam had bumped into a couple of statues on the 6th floor while he was freaking out up there. Alden understood that people standing in bright spots couldn't clearly make out dark areas. He knew Liam's night vision should be at least as dull as his own was from being in the brighter stairwell. He still felt like a sitting duck. A few seconds passed, then Liam stepped out of the light and headed for his boom room. He had never even looked in Alden's direction. He's walking well. Maybe he took the pain injector I gave him already. It was the same as the one Alden had taken earlier. Knocked everything down to manageable levels. But really. Please put something on your feet, man. Fabric, cardboard, anything. Having no skin left on them is going to suck so much. Line of asterisks. Liam looked for his shoes. Alden sat on the floor in the dark, monitoring him with his ears. There was scuffing, thumping, splashing. A lot of splashing. Did he find a whole lake in the torture chamber? Alden did have some questions about how the water had entered and exited the building down here. Without windows, had it punched through walls? I hope the whole place isn't about to fall on top of my head. He stretched his shoulders, organized his thoughts. He was trying to take advantage of the short delay as much as he could. Zoraida lay across his lap. Water dripped from the ceiling around them as if in mockery of the rain that had so recently stopped falling outside. I'm going to need to take that stimulant sooner than I planned. And I need some light. I'm too tired to search the whole building for a light, but that's what I'm going to need. How do people make torches? Can't I do that? Royce, can you hear me? Come on, Royce. Come on. Alden closed his eyes and swallowed. Liam kept calling for his brother and sister. His voice was growing more desperate every time. Please answer him, one of you. Please don't leave him alone. The man was still looking for the shoes. Or maybe he'd found them and he was gearing up in other ways. That would be smart. Alden tried not to feel ashamed. And sad. Afraid. He tried not to wonder if he was letting another person suffer more than he had to. And at the same time, he tried not to feel like he was already in trouble so deep that he might not make it to the surface no matter how overcautious he was. He patted one of Zoraida's arms a few times, just so that he felt less alone. It's all right. We were moving forward well enough earlier. We were getting closer and closer to safety. We'll make it out. He didn't quite believe himself. And because of that, because he wanted this terrible situation to end, he found himself pulling up his interface and flicking to the Privileges tab. One simple, weighty word at the bottom of the list stared at him. Mother. So, thought Alden. I guess it's finally time to think about this seriously. It didn't look like a button. Just a word. Can't I really? A memory came to him. Sharp and fresh. Alisart's single quotation's hands had touched his cheeks, in that teleportation room on her spaceship that was supposed to kill him. Mother, she had said, if this one makes it to you, place both your eyes upon him. And because of that, because Alisart's single quotation had suffered and served for who knew how long and earned herself a favor or two from that entity, Alden Thorne got to live a little more. He got the sort of extraordinary help the Quaternary had so regretfully informed him he was not deemed worthy of. More extraordinary than that, even. I got to make a couple of important choices. And I got the chance to be safe again. Though it had been as simple as Alisart's single quotation asking, Alden had never for a second thought it was actually simple. She hesitated. She was so upset about what happened to me. I saw how guilty she felt. But she still hesitated to ask. The night had been walking out the door to leave him to his fate when she changed her mind and turned back to ask for that favor. This option, if it was an option at all and Alden wasn't misunderstanding completely, would come with so much more than strings attached. I don't think I'm misunderstanding. She was paying attention to me when I saw the privilege for the first time. She knew exactly what I thought. I even told her I knew she wasn't a genie. He wasn't Alisart's single quotation. He wasn't owed. If Alden wanted to ask for favors, he was going to have to earn them. And quiet rabbits probably couldn't do that. He opened a text message window to nobody. If I use my final privilege, then don't you have to talk to me? I can't get in touch with Artona without you. The dripping of the water all around him seemed loud. A frigid drop hit his head and slid down the side of his cheek. Then, a voice whispered in his ear. It was a pleasant enough one, neither male nor female. Are you using that privilege, Alden? It's answering. Like this. I can't even use it to send a text if I beg right now, but it answers this. if just the mention of the privilege was enough to reprioritize its attention. Alden suddenly felt like he was hanging on to the edge of a cliff by a single fingertip. The question hung there, too, right beside him. "No," he wrote. "I'm sorry for bothering you. I wasn't thinking clearly. I won't mention that subject again unless I mean it." Chapter 141. Alden shifted Zoraide on his back and peered out of the gaping hole in the front wall of Apogee Artist Spaces. Liam had just made it to the intersection. The man's chest was wrapped in white light. He had found some kind of flexible, glowing tubing in his studio or the wreckage. And his feet were covered now, one with a shoe, one with something Alden couldn't identify from here. Good luck, he thought as the brute leaped over what looked like a destroyed refrigerator and disappeared around the corner. My turn to go. He wanted a flashlight, but while he listened to Liam frantically searching his ruined studio for supplies, he had decided that it would take too long to find one in this mess. Better to get off this street and to a clearer area first. The boom rooms had only partially lived up to their names. On this hall that connected directly to the building's entryway and exterior, most of the rooms were standing, but their doors had been blown inward by the force of the water. All kinds of things had gotten scrambled and smashed. Some of the mess had drifted into the hallway or out of the building altogether when the water retreated. He was guessing most of it had left through the giant gap where the puzzle door and the stretch of concrete wall on one side of it had once been. There was an entire room missing there, just behind Alden and to his left. Reinforced walls had been turned to rubble, and so much of the ceiling was gone that the second floor was exposed. He couldn't help looking back at that area one last time, wondering if he could possibly be correct about how it had happened. It looks like a torpedo hit the front of the building and burst through there instead of just the big wave. "Hey," he said, staring at the thing he suspected of being that torpedo. "You don't happen to have a package with a flashlight in you, do you?" A glowing red hand sign appeared, illuminating an odd nook in the rubble as it waved hello. It looked like something largish had been sitting there, supporting the debris as it fell all around it, and then that something had disappeared. Now, there was a single post drop in the precise center of that space, standing upright. Alden wasn't sure it was fair of him to be suspicious of the drop. The mailbox wasn't totally unharmed. Its solar panel top was broken from where a broken pipe had hit it. The screen that was displaying the hand was shattered, and some rubble around it ruined the perfection of the strange pocket it sat in. But the pocket was still there. It looked like it could have been created by a water bubble that had surrounded the post drop and launched it into apogee. And the mailbox was in unexpectedly fantastic shape if it was a regular victim of a massive wave. The glowing hand turned into a smiley face. "I'm sorry, customer. I don't recognize you. My connection to system information seems to be malfunctioning. Please input your name on the touch screen if you'd like to send mail." "Where did you come from?" Alden asked it, thinking that he might at least get the name of a location. He'd know to avoid going that way as he traveled, since missing mailboxes didn't bode well for the conditions there. But there must not have been a programmed response for that question. The device said "I'm sorry, customer," again in that same tonelessly polite voice. Much more boring than the one Alden remembered from the post drop he'd used to send his message to the Volras. That feels like it was years ago. Before he left home. Before he was a rabbit. Somewhere on the other side of that chasm in his life. He took a deep breath. "All right, Zoraide. Let's go for a walk." He stepped out of the building onto what had once been a pristine sidewalk, but before he could go any farther, a motion a few feet ahead caught his eye. Then the light of the mailbox winked out, and he couldn't see clearly enough to make out the source of the motion anymore. Post drop. The red light came back on behind him. "I'm sorry, customer. I don't recognize." Alden ignored it. He took another step, debris crunching beneath his feet, and looked down. There was a small snake, curled up on top of a piece of fiberboard beside a plastic bento box decorated with cherry blossoms. The animal wasn't moving now, but it was still in one piece. "You got washed all the way out here? That must have been a cold, scary swim." Liam's snake was pencil-thin, and even though Alden couldn't make out the color right now, He knew from seeing it in its habitat earlier that its patterned skin was primarily dark orange. I hear you're friendly. But are you deadly? He glanced at the bento. It had a lid. Practically fake then. Alden groaned like an old man as he bent down with Zoraid's weight on his back. The bento had a pair of chopsticks clipped to the inside of the lid. I'm neutral on snakes, he said, slipping the sticks under the creature. I'm not neutral on being bitten by venomous ones. So please forgive me for poking you with these things and trapping you in a lunchbox instead of carrying you around on my nice warm body. The snake was really sluggish. From the temperature and exhaustion, Alden assumed. It barely twitched as he scooped it into its new carrying case. Sorry. He shut the lid on the snake and tucking the bento into his bag. The ride might be bumpy, but I think your chances are better with me than out here in the street. If you live, you'll be my easiest ever rescue. So please do that. He closed the flap on the bag and looked around him. The swift movement of the water out of this area seemed to have carried the worst of the debris away from this particular spot, but there was some unfathomable shit going on anyway. Something that Alden could only guess was a steel industrial vat was on its side in the road right in front of him. An amount of detritus had piled up behind it. He could barely pick out what any of it was. Whole houses are missing. That vat is big enough for cars to disappear inside it. This is all too big to deal with mentally, never mind physically. From the 6th floor, he had marked the general area he wanted to head toward. He was going to get out of this demolition zone and then try to dodge the places where the absence of lights indicated some other picturesque corner of Apex had been ground into suburban paste. He patted Zoraid's braid in the bag. Finding the snake had made him feel a little better. Like it was proof that he would survive, too. He didn't care if it made sense or not. Let's all live then, he said. How does that sound? Line of asterisks. Line of asterisks. Well, this looks different than it did earlier today, doesn't it? Lukeville stood on his toes and craned his neck to examine the crowd in the MPE gymnasium. The facility the students in the high school's hero program used was huge, as spaces for avowed talent training and athletics tended to be. Lots of superhumans needed room for their powers to shine, and there was plenty of that here. Usually. Right now, Lute was wondering if they were going to have to start stacking students on top of each other to fit them all in. Like in Elijah's photo. The image the F-rank rabbit had taken of the human stackers outside the casino was the last bit of internet access Lute had enjoyed. And that had been over an hour ago. He'd been slow arriving here at his designated evac location because people who recognized him had kept stopping him to ask him for word chains. And once he'd realized there was a significant problem on that front, he'd been trying to correct it. Only to fail hard. They're all going to think I'm a greedy Vora who won't share even in a crisis. That's what everyone is going to think no matter what I say. The truth wasn't much better, and his reputation could hardly sink lower. So in that sense he supposed it was fine. People bumped into him. He was still standing in the doorway that separated the building's front vestibule from the gym itself, and the crowd was so thick that he basically couldn't move until everyone else did. Lute was being careful about how he moved. He'd stacked quite a few word chains on himself, since he could still do that just fine, and he wasn't accustomed to carrying this many at once. Hazel got her jollies by turning herself into a faux brute. His own preferred daily chain list was more moderate. He didn't think he'd gone overboard yet, but his body still felt like an ill-fitted suit. Self-mastery chains, 2 of them, were keeping it all manageable. He heard someone mention the teleportation complex, and he focused on the other boy's voice, tuning out the rest of the clamor. Got in touch with Mom finally on Beals and Fajir watch. Took forever. Anyway, she's night shift, and she said they had her chipping ice off the magic symbols. Some side effect from heavy use. You'd think it would be heat if it was anything, wouldn't you? She said the system was dropping hundreds of kids at once in the concourse, not even bothering with bays. It made them clear all the furniture out. She said the kids were there and gone so fast that she heard one batch yelling and crying, and when she turned around it was just voices echoing around the place. The kids were already gone on to who knows where. Lute couldn't see the speaker through the crowd. There was a pause, then the boy added, "It was kind of scary." She said the tiles on the concourse floor were starting to crack in places. She pried up a piece because she thought she saw something strange, and there are symbols under there, too. Just like in the base. She asked one of the security people who's worked there forever what that was about, and he said the whole building is actually a teleporter. The bays are just more refined or something. "That's not scary," said a girl. "It's cool. I didn't know that." I wasn't done. The security man told her that the Artonans who come to do maintenance don't just work on the building. They always check the lots in the parking garage and part of the streets around the place. When he first started working there, he asked them why the full teleportation area was so big, and one of them actually answered him. What did they say? That the whole thing would only be used if Enzidora was no longer a suitable place to live. Lute shivered. This is what I get for eavesdropping, he thought. Nightmare fuel. But in one way, it made him feel better. The system was mass teleporting people. With that plus shelters being available, his parents were probably already somewhere safe, or they would be very soon. Mom might not even have needed a teleport. She's almost always with Alaya. If nothing else, Alaya was powerful. And they could be living at the penthouse right now. They'd be totally safe there. As the throng of people finally pushed its way into the gym proper, a local interface message appeared. This is a secure location. Do not leave. Okay then, Lute muttered. I will not leave. Easy enough. The noise level was ridiculous. A few people crying. More people laughing and joking around with their friends. There were around 30 young children in a group on the white floor, singing Dunguri Korokoro with the grown-ups who were watching them. Kids center floor. Kids center floor. He is a man. Lute tuned out the people shouting instructions for Nana vowed. But a couple of minutes later, a young woman wearing a bright red vest over her t-shirt forced her way through the crowd toward him. Hi. She said brightly. Are you looking for your family? I'll find them for you if you want to go ahead to the floor with the other minors. I'm an S rank. She looked confused for a second, then she gasped, You're the Blura boy? Lute bit back a sigh. That's me. Please don't ask me for a word chain right now. I'm so sorry. It's fine. I'm really sorry. It's nothing. I'm only 15. But I should have recognized you. I see you all the time. You look different without your. We both have a class in meal center around the same time. I'm taking throat singing. She didn't recognize me without an eye patch, Lute thought. He'd been too flustered on his way out of the room to worry about something like that. Anyway, the whole place is supposed to be safe, she said, but they told us to put more vulnerable people in the center of the gym floor, and less vulnerable people around the edges. If you want, you can even go sit in the side halls and classrooms. There's more room there. For now. Doesn't look like it's going to last. The Unicombat facility is filling up fast, too. Don't leave the building or you might not get back in. A little room to breathe sounded good, even if it wasn't guaranteed to last. I wonder if I should just have stayed in my room. The Chilena North Campus wasn't very close to the coast. He couldn't imagine the ocean reaching them here unless the whole country was screwed. Lute made his way slowly through the crowd and eventually reached one of the side halls. He could actually walk in here. The classrooms were open, but all the desks were full. He didn't feel like sitting down anyway, so he wandered for a bit, poking his head inside of rooms to see what footage of the disaster was playing on the projection screens and listening in on people's conversations. I swear on my skill, that's what they said. The old Nilima high-rise was completely underwater for a while. Lute wondered briefly if Paragon Academy was still there. Then he frowned. That high-rise is where Alexi's family lives. He assumed most of the newest first-year hero class, including his roommates, had gotten stuck at Rosy Grove when everything went wrong. If that place was underwater, the whole family neighborhood would be. That's just not possible, someone said. No. Reread the system update. Observed effects include force submersion, usually but not always of elementally defined objects, rapid motion of submerged materials, sudden influxes of water in limited coastal areas. What are you saying? A building is an object. It would be like what happened to the span. A girl's voice chimed in. I just talked to someone in the bathroom who was there. She only just made it back to campus. In the llama? At the span. Luke stepped aside to let a group of older teens enter the room where the discussion was taking place. A moment later, his ears picked up on another conversation happening behind him. You'll let me know if they reply back, won't you, Vandy? Of course I will. Just don't leave the building. We need to keep track of everyone. I'm after Heloisa. No, Sanjay. You're after Olive. She put herself on the list before you did. It won't be long. Luke turned. He could only make out a slice of Vandy Carrison's face and torso, thanks to the gaggle of people standing around her as she sat with her back to the wall. He moved closer, trying to see around the backside of an appallingly lazy guitarist he knew from a shared class. Vandy had claimed one of the only outlets on the hallway, and she had plugged in one of those power strips that was made for Infogere. 3 of the latest model phones were linked to it by their tiny charger threads, and all of them were currently being held by people who were texting on them. With one hand, Vandy was passing a 4th phone that a juster girl who could make illusions of herself. With the other, she was writing in a spiral-bound notebook. Heloisa, now that you've had your turn, would you go ask the instructors and the helpers if they have any messages that should be sent? She asked an athletic girl who was wearing sneakers with pajama shorts and a hoodie. Since they're so busy, we can do it for them. Just make sure you get names and enough information. Vandy ripped some sheets of paper out of the notebook and passed them over. Thanks for the mission. Heloisa sprang up from her squat on the floor and raced off. Luke took advantage of the gap left by her absence to slip even closer to Vandy. Are all the phones hers? Where did she get so much info-gear? She'd never carried the stuff back at Paragon, and he couldn't imagine why she would suddenly have started once she got her own interface. Vandy was wearing her gym suit. Luke wondered if it was for safety, or if she'd run out of the dorms in such a hurry that the unitard was more appropriate than whatever she'd had on. Her brown hair was uncharacteristically unkempt, and strands were escaping from a cloud-shaped barrette to fall around her cheeks as she focused on the chart she had made inside her notebook. There were a ton of names on it already. One of the phones chimed, and the boy holding it passed it to her. Vandy read the message, wrote it down in the notebook beside someone's name, then passed it back. Why couldn't someone else have set up a calling service? Luke wondered. She wasn't a person who would refuse to let him use the phone just because she hated him, but he still wished he didn't have to ask. Hi, Vandy. Her pen stopped scratching at the notebook. Her eyes met his. Luke. Are you sharing your phones? Do you mind if I borrow one to see if I have a message? Cyril had bought himself and Infogere a watch months ago, after moving out of the apartment Jessica had provided for him while Luke was growing up. The place was empty now. She had left messages suggesting Luke could have it. He had never answered them. When Vandy didn't reply, Luke added, not right now or anything. Put me at the bottom of the list. She made him wait an awkwardly long time for an answer. Just as he was growing afraid that she might actually refuse, she nodded. All right. Stay nearby. I'll call your name when it's your turn. Thank you. I appreciate. I'd like a word chain, she interrupted. Her voice was matter-of-fact. Mostly. Luke thought he was probably imagining the edge. Right. She didn't mean it in a bartering way. Did she? Do you mean I can't send a text if I don't? I'd like to be able to focus better, Vandy said, still staring at him. I'm finding it difficult to concentrate on what matters right now. I will, of course, pay back the debt at a later date. And I will give you money. Isn't that how it usually works? Matadero. Her mom. She probably is finding it difficult to concentrate. I don't actually charge people for that kind of arrangement. I'd do it. I really would. But, the thing is. He didn't blush. Blushing was for people who hadn't spent months learning to control their facial expressions with their self-mastery chain active. I can't actually target people right now, he confessed. The system assist is off, and I never learned how to do it without it. Because why would I have needed to? That's ridiculous, the lurking guitarist scoffed before Vandy could reply. I can still target things. He's lying. Lute actually had no idea what the dude's avowed powers were. He also didn't care. Good for you, he said coolly. Why don't you try to target the right notes the next time you play instead of publicly humiliating your instrument? The system is no longer assisting me with targeting. I can't figure out how to do it without the system's help. Therefore, I am not currently performing word chains for other people. Why would the system? It's none of your business. I'm talking to Vandy. Her brows were drawn together. Why would the system deny you targeting assistance? She asked. Lute groaned. Internally. Externally, he cultivated a persona of patience and earnest apology. You could do so much with your skill to help people tonight, Vandy said. I'm surprised you haven't been called for duty. Well, said Lute, mentally cursing at his grandmother and his tattoo for not allowing him to fully explain. It's a complicated situation. Take it up with the Palace of Unbreaking. Chainer is theirs, and they do not want me to get panicky and cast chains on entire buildings full of humans who might bite it or shirk debt. Not without some form of prepayment anyway. The only other explanation he could think of was that it was the system itself that didn't want to play with chainers right now. It wasn't just targeting that was down. Mass bestowal was a package that came with other significant system assistance. Some of the old people had trained themselves to do things without its help, but even if Lute had been trying to learn how, he should be a decade or 3 away from getting there. I assume if the crisis continues for long enough, and if the system actually needs me, I'll be able to do more, he said, hoping that satisfied Vandy. They had a staring contest. She doesn't look very satisfied. If you can't do it, then, I will try for you. I tried for some other people tonight. Then it's okay, Vandy finished. Oh. She wasn't going to refuse after all. Lute watched her write his name on the chart. There was an odd feeling in his gut. Is your mom all right, Vandy? Do you know? He didn't think he was allowed to ask her that. I'll try, he said. Mental focus. There's one I like for that. I call it zone in because the real name is such a pain. Never mind. Just a minute. He pressed his hands together, crossing just the ring fingers over each other in the first sign. The word chain was one he knew well enough to cast without too much thought, so he tried to think about targeting while he whispered the words. For all the good it'll do. He'd tried on more than a dozen people already. More than once on most of them. What an apex was targeting anyway? It was a brain button Lute could click on his interface. He had learned to do that mentally. It was a word he could say. Or pointing with a finger. It was hey, system, help me aim at Vandy Carrison. When the system was ignoring you, there was none of that. So what was there to do other than stare really, really hard at Vandy, who is staring really, really hard at me, and think about pointing my magic and my soul and the attention of a word chain at her. Go get her, chain. Ignore me. I am a mighty chainer, and I command you. Lute had made one interesting discovery because of this situation. The word chains didn't seem to affect him when he was trying very hard to give them to another person this way. He'd accidentally hit himself with a single energy chain he hadn't wanted, but other than that, they'd just failed. This one was going to fail, too. I feel bad. Chainer could actually be impressive at a time like this, but it's just not going to be. Vandy was still looking at him. She'd always had striking eyes. He'd thought she was pretty that day she'd made him hand over the dice to Carlotta. He still thought she was pretty now. What an annoyance. Finding someone hot when you had mixed feelings, heavily leaning toward bitter and embarrassed, about how they'd treated you for years and how you treated them in return, was stupid. Being a teenager was stupid. That stray draft that blew some of Vandy's hair toward her mouth, making her tuck it behind her ear again as she moistened her lips with her tongue, was extra stupid. Lute finished the chain. Sorry, Vandy. I tried my... You did it after all, said Vandy. Thank you. That's better. I'm sure I'll be much more efficient now. Did it work? He asked in surprise. Yes, she said, already focused on adding a new column to her chart. Although the system didn't ask for my permission or inform me about what word chain you were casting. Isn't it supposed to? That's very interesting. It usually does. She nodded. It's good that it worked. You should consider what you might have done differently this time from your previous attempts. You're very powerful, Lute. You have a responsibility to take things seriously. He stiffened, then his muscles loosened up a second later thanks to the self-mastery. I wanted the horny killed, and she did it just like that. Remarkable. You do always want everything to be taken seriously, don't you? He said. All right. Glad it worked for you. Say something when it's my turn to use a phone. I'll hear you. He strode off, trying to look unbothered. Probably succeeding. She's just doing her version of the right thing, like always. It's good that she doesn't realize she made you cry the last time she suggested you might take being an avowed seriously. Her mom's on Matadero. Give her a break. The mood fell away from him as he walked down the hall. It was the wrong time to be hung up on such a small thing. Something had gone seriously wrong. The system was issuing disaster alerts. It was impossible to feel personally endangered when he was surrounded by bright lights, instructors, and hundreds of teenagers, many of whom were more excited and intrigued by the drama of what was happening than frightened. But there were still some quiet, worried faces around him. And every time Lute saw one it made him feel the knot in his own chest more acutely. He didn't think anything bad could have happened to his parents. Not really. Evacuations were happening all over Apex and F-City. The system was helping. Adult Avowed were helping. Most of the Hero Program faculty and Principal Juna from Sciences were out there right now. There were Hyperboles on duty. There were wizards. It's fine, right? He'd feel a lot better after he'd used the phone. Mom can probably get her hands on Infogir, too. Even on a night like tonight. She's good at things like that. He found a patch of wall to lean against and tried to figure out how he'd targeted Vandy Carrison. Is it because she's an S, too? I don't think that should make a difference, but maybe it could. Beside him, two girls were having a conversation about how the tips of the Apex Crescent were being completely emptied of people. My grandpa has a house in Punta de la Luna, said a girl. That place is so nice. They have big yards. And the boardwalk, her friend replied. Dad said Grandpa called him from the train, fiery mad that some speedster had told him he had to leave. He said they were just going to let the whole place go to the fish, and what did that say about the fighting spirit of Avowed? Is your grandpa a superhero? No. He's a more factor. Have you ever seen Love Across Dimensions? He plays all the characters. Do you think they should really just let whole neighborhoods go like that, though? Well, it's a tiny area surrounded by ocean on three sides. I just hope they get everyone out before. Lute, Vandy said from the other end of the hall, it's your turn next. He was able to pick out her voice even though she hadn't spoken it loudly. Surprised and relieved his chance had come so much sooner than he'd expected, he headed back toward her. When he reached her, she passed him one of the phones. It was warm from being held in so many hands. The screens on these new models automatically recognize you once you give them permission to add you as the current user, and any messages you've received will appear in the inbox. You get to hold it for 3 minutes and send as many messages as you can in that time. Challenge accepted, thought Lute, the fingers of his right hand already flickering over the device's keypad. The inbox was showing up as empty. He hated that. He had really thought one of them would have gotten their hands on a phone by now, but maybe they were in the same situation as him, stuck waiting in line for someone at a shelter to share. When you get done, it's best if you tell the phone it can deliver your messages to me for the night, said Vandy. That way any that have come in will pop up automatically whenever I hold it, and I'll send a runner to find you as soon as I get one for you. Otherwise you'll have to wait for another turn to check the phone yourself. Okay. I'll give permission. I actually thought it would take much longer for my turn to come, though, he said, finishing addressing a general alive and well message to his parents and, for good measure, Amy. You have so many names on the chart. You're moving through them really fast. Vandy glanced up at him and then back down. No. We're already behind schedule. You were just on the shorter list because I assumed you were trying to get in touch with your parents. Luke sent a message to a couple of people his dad sometimes hung out with, asking if they'd seen him tonight. Then he started one to Aunt Carrie. She was so responsible that she'd definitely answer if she happened to see it. Next I'll do Roman. He likes to gossip so he might know things. And then I'll send something to the guys. What Vandy had said suddenly registered, but he didn't want to waste his time with the phone to ask questions. Just as his 3 minutes were approaching their end, the device pinged, and Luke's thumb shot down to accept the message. Oh. Hoyu has just sent me something. That's a really long text. Wow. Hoyu wrote me a book, he said. I can't read it in the next 4 seconds. Hoyu texted you? Vandy looked up. Then down. Then around. You can have it for 1 more minute. Luke raised an eyebrow. She's breaking a rule. He was 100% sure she was doing it for Hoyu, not for him. But he read the message gladly. They all got off the bridge. Since when were they on the bridge? And it doesn't sound like Alden and Lexi are with him. But he says they're all safe. Hoyu had signed the message phone cooker. Clinging to the phone for a bit longer after his extra minute was up was tempting, but Luke passed it back. Why was I on a short list? He asked. Aren't most people here trying to get in touch with their parents? Yes, said Vandy. But I made a separate section of the chart for people who had more reason to be worried about family members. Because they're not avowed? I think. That was thoughtful of her. They're probably fine, he said, as much to himself as to her. I don't know exactly where they are, but the system is teleporting people away from dangerous areas, right? Everyone on campus had just been told to walk to shelters since they had the high school and uni gyms. Vandy exchanged a look with Olive, who was sitting beside her, wearing a pink jacket backwards. Their faces. What? Luke asked. The system's the one in charge of teleporting people, said Olive. It's doing it in an unexpected way. Not like most people are thinking it should. Either it's in serious emergency control mode or the Artonans are. I guess there's not a real difference. Are you saying it's not teleporting everyone out of dangerous areas? Vandy set aside her pen. Luke was now officially afraid of whatever she was going to say. Its teleportation priority order seems to be based on several different factors according to what we've heard in the messages we've been receiving. All non-avowed below the age of 20 definitely received the highest priority. Right, said Luke. Like Apex emergency priority. Vulnerable people first. But after evacuating minors, its second priority seems to be something more like combat force preservation, said Vandy. Balanced with consideration for an individual's immediate risk but not as much as we might expect. We just took a message from someone who said if you reject your teleport, you don't get another no matter how much trouble you get yourself into, Olive piped up. And then you have to consider how the system is teleporting around all of the people who are fighting the ocean and performing in-person rescues. Back up, said Luke. What does combat force preservation mean? Vandy looked uncomfortable. It means what it sounds like. But don't worry. There are tall buildings and shelters all over the place. Any inland skyscraper should be an excellent evacuation spot. There is no way, thought Luke, that my parents fall into any category that Vandy Carrison might call a combat force. Almost everyone, said Vandy, will be fine. Line of asterisks. Line of asterisks. This is a walk, Natalie Quire said, trying to hold a small pink umbrella over herself and Hadiza at the same time. Whew. Okay. I'm sure we are just about to reach Bunker Street. Yay. Stay positive. Hadiza, are your feet all right? They have been better. Hadiza was looking down at the high heels she had worn for their Friday night out. My skill makes them beautiful. Not comfortable. You can take them off soon. Elijah. Go, Elijah. Good Elijah. Smiles. Elijah sighed. Go, Natalie, she said in a heavy accent, twirling her own umbrella a little. Good Natalie. Smiles. Natalie held a hand up for a high five, and Elijah obliged her before turning to Hadiza and giving the Nigerian girl a pained look. She thinks you are someone who gets too loud when nervous, Natalie, Hadiza said. I can tell by her face. I'm going to learn Lithuanian after this, Natalie announced. It's the obvious thing to do. Nusabaris was near the coast. The whole district had cleared out and headed inland when the sirens started. The rabbit girls had all three been told to head to the same place to seek safety. Timer, said Elijah quietly. Mine's longer now, too, Hadiza said. Mine, too. Again. But I wasn't going to mention it this time because we are almost there. I can practically smell Bunker Street from here. They were in a throng of people waiting to cross a street with a less auspicious name. The traffic had stopped obeying lights in some places, which wasn't helping when it came to getting around. Left, said Elijah. The other two looked at her. Left? Hadiza asked. Elijah pointed left, made a working motion with two of her fingers, then pointed straight ahead. We'll follow you, Natalie said. Lead, lead. Elijah set off, and they hurried after her. Not long after, a man walking on the sidewalk behind them suddenly let out a relieved sound, and as they all three turned to look, he disappeared. The black umbrella that had been in his hand hit the ground with a clatter. Hadiza mumbled something. Elijah said, no fair. It was what they had started saying every time someone was teleported away to instant safety. No fair, Hadiza agreed. No fair. But free umbrella. One for each of us. Natalie thrust the pink umbrella toward Hadiza and ran over to pick up the one the man had dropped. This is a big one. Would either of you like it? At that moment, their interfaces flared. Local update, Bunker Street shelter at capacity. Head north to Norsehouse condominiums. Natalie bit her lip. That's new. Not bad. Just new instructions. Hadiza was glaring at her own notice. Elijah's hands were clenched at her sides. Why? She whispered. It says it's full, Natalie said. Why? Elijah demanded, throwing aside her umbrella to stare up at the sky. She probably wonders why we were sent to a shelter that would be filled before we reached it, Hadiza said. I wonder too. Maybe the system made a mistake? Does it do that? Hadiza asked. Then her eyes widened. Elijah? Elijah. Where are you going? Elijah had taken off running. That isn't north. Hadiza called. She and Natalie chased after their friend down the street, then across it onto another, both of them arguing with her and yelling at her. She yelled back one- and two-word answers in English that didn't do enough to explain what the matter was. Then they started to hear the sounds of the mob. Elijah slowed down. The others did as well. They passed a sign that said Bunker Street Entry 2, and their own fight was forgotten as they were met with a much more serious one. What is this? Hadiza breathed. They stood on a one-way lane that intersected Bunker Street. A horde of people, shouting demands and swearing in a dozen languages, stood between them and the entrance to the bunker that the street had been named for. A section of the street itself had lifted like a hatch to reveal a wide ramp that led down below the surface. Men and women with red rings of light over their heads were trying to push the crowd back from the opening. Someone shot a spell at a man who'd scaled the massive hatch from behind, and he fell, bellowing. Natalie shrieked, then covered her mouth with her hands, backing away. She bumped into Hadiza, who never even blinked. Warning, hazard in your area. Do not interfere with avowed on assignment. Avowed on assignment are indicated on your interface. We don't stay here, said Hadiza suddenly. She grabbed Elijah by the arm. Come with us. Let's go. Elijah was gazing at the bunker. Her chest was heaving. Her eyes started to water. What's wrong? Natalie asked. Elijah, what's wrong? We just need to keep walking. We're getting farther and farther from the coast with every step. It's all right. The older girl said something in Lithuanian, her voice shaking. Hadaisa and Natalie looked at each other. Timer, said Elijah, wiping at her eyes and spinning around to start back the way they'd come. Did yours change again? Hadaisa said. No timer for me, said Elijah. None. It's gone. Line of asterisks. Line of asterisks. Alden was exhausted. He knew because he had started stumbling. First over one piece of rubbish he'd misjudged, then another. The next street will be clear. The next. Keep going, he told himself. You can take the stimulant when you get just a little farther. Don't want it to wear off. At least it's not that leaf song shit that almost blew up your heart. Roro had literally healed his heart. That was sobering. He usually thought about other things she'd healed because those sessions had happened when he was more coherent and in more pain. But heart is a pretty important body part, and mine had to be healed. Let's not do that again. His Artonin tablet was in his hand, screen pointed toward his feet. It didn't actually have a flashlight feature, so he'd set it to play one of Kibby's saved videos as bright as it could. Alden, she was saying, when we see each other again, how different will you be? It was one of her sweeter messages. Kibby had many modes: scientist, moralizer, reminiscer, teacher. This particular mode was different, and it didn't crop up as often in the videos as it had in person, which was a great thing. But Alden still found its reappearance touching. For example, said Kibby, you might grow even taller than Distinguished Master Rodin. You might also grow to have different opinions about people. Even people you know very well. Like me. Do you think those two things might happen to you? So sneaky, Kibby. I will definitely never know which question you actually want answered if you distract me by mentioning me growing even taller than Joe. Humans become adults more quickly than Artonans, she said. Maybe you are becoming different faster than you realize. I think you should think about it and you should tell me your thoughts. My thoughts are that every time you worry about something so silly I have to increase the size of our someday matching tattoos by 10%. I will never have a different opinion about you, Kibby said. But that doesn't mean that you're the same. I think I don't like how I answered this message. He had reassured her that he'd never stop liking her and she wouldn't find his personality that different when they met again, but he'd been less open than he might have been if they were face to face. A little too aware of the fact that others might see it. I'll redo it as soon as I don't look like hell. He trudged on until he finally made it to a street that looked normal. Except for the power being out and the place being abandoned. It had taken forever. As his reward, he gave himself the stimulant. He felt better instantly. Not wonderful, but well enough to keep going. With his newfound energy and his ori out, he broke into a house that looked like it belonged on the cover of an architectural magazine and ignored the high-pitched screeching of an alarm while he committed burglary. I should have done this before I even left Punta de la Luna, Alden said to Zoraida and the snake while he sat on a bench at the foot of a king-sized bed and put on thick socks and a pair of boots. Hindsight. In the future, we resort to crime faster. He stuffed the sandals into his bag in case something happened to the boots. The people who lived here kept their flashlights in the pantry, which was not one of the first places Alden had looked, but at least once he found them. All of them worked. I owe them for 3 flashlights, the socks and shoes, and a cherry cola, he thought when he was done with his quick supply run. And 1 door. He'd used his crushing spell on the knob to get inside, and he was carrying the pieces away with him. If the house survived the night, he thought the presence of a perfectly pancaked doorknob would be more suspicious than no doorknobs at all. As he set out, he marked a new building he wanted to head toward. It had 2 flashing antennas on the top. I can do this. It really can't be that far until I find people. Lots of people. Humanity, not just isolated daredevils or murderers. He'd been periodically peeking at the scratch pad Liam had given him, hoping that the man had found his sister and she'd activated the other half. So far there had been nothing. 10 minutes later, as he was checking a car parked on a curb for keys, the sound of water reached him. Alden lifted the flashlight and spun in circles. Where is it? And where is it headed? This street seemed fine. Just as he was realizing that the source of the noise must be more distant than he feared, the flashlight beam illuminated the car, and he stopped, staring at the raindrops on the hood that hadn't completely dried from the last drizzle. They were oozing slowly in the direction he wanted to go. That's not great. I can't knowingly head toward what's got to be a growing problem. But I shouldn't backtrack either. A sheet of paper, a flyer torn from its home no doubt, fluttered past him. Alden hesitated for a few seconds more, trying to think around his nerves. Then he set out at a diagonal, hoping that would take him forward without putting him in harm's way. Zaridy, tiny snake, we're still moving. That's what counts. Our night has already sucked enough now, and it's time for it to get better. Talking to his passengers was as good a way to stay motivated as any. The diagonal path he had set took him back onto streets strewn with evidence that flooding had taken place. The debris grew thicker and thicker, and after a careful examination of some very still water that had collected on the lid of an overturned garbage can, Alden decided it was safe enough to switch back to a more direct route. Not long after that, in a place where the debris from some large movement of water had been deposited in a huge drift, he found the bodies. Tope continued,